loves, my name is Amber, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be discussing You Can't Blame the Flower by Ruthie Stevens. While this video is not monetarily sponsored in any way, I did receive the copy of the book in order to review from the Books Forward Friends program. Before we get too far into this review, I did want to mention a few trigger warnings, including recollections of sexual assault, alcohol and drug use, as well as some subtle homophobia, and the entire book takes place during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, you know, definitely varying opinions and explanations of that. So if any of these things are liable to be particularly bothering or triggering to you, please have extreme discretion while watching the rest of this review or reading the book. So as for the premise of the book, it does take place during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in the US, more specifically when the first lockdown stay-at-home orders occurred. So the book primarily follows Liliana, an attorney with the Energy Corporation who happens to own this very large, expansive estate that she was willed, and the heads of her corporation approach her to host a variety of their employees and coworkers to enable them to quarantine together and all work from this estate and keep the company running during the shutdown through the pandemic. And so the book follows both Liliana as well as this varying cast of coworkers and a few of her own personal friends who decide to quarantine with them as well through the first few months of the shutdown and the pandemic, and trying to keep this company running. And, you know, all of these varying coworkers are of various ethnicities and sexualities and opinions and preferences and aren't necessarily all friends. So you can probably see about how well that would turn out having everybody quarantined together in a single household that's owned by one particular employee. Along with some of Liliana's personal friends and all of her coworkers, the estate also maintains a staff. There are a few members of the estate staff because Liliana doesn't actually live on this estate. It's just one that she owns and she maintains from a distance, as she doesn't like being there because it did belong to an ex-lover of hers who is now deceased, who was also her professor at one point, and it's a thing. So along with this whole, you know, household of clashing personalities trying to get along and coexist during a very stressful and concerning time, we also have some mysteries start to arise when things start to go missing, and, you know, the power plays of the household are kind of questioned and dealt with. And quite frankly, the blurb on the book probably explains it a little bit better, so I think I'll probably read that as well. Introverted young attorney Liliana Rivers knew one day she would return to Windsor, the mysterious mansion in the middle of nowhere, Texas, where flowers don't grow. She didn't know her return would be with a select group of her corporate colleagues to quarantine at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. The comedy of errors of the employees coexisting intertwines with a darker backstory of how Liliana came to inherit Windsor from the late William Wimsor-Garden, her former college professor and boss. While the guests at Windsor navigate awkward encounters, romantic interests, and workplace obstacles, Liliana grapples with her haunting memories of William, her insecurities with intimacy, and her attraction to the captivating company vice president. Tensions escalate when the guests investigate a theft and learn that one or more among them is harboring secrets that put not only their careers at risk, but also their lives. Windsor awaits. So that kind of gives you a vibe of the narrative and story behind the book. And conceptually, I did actually really like the thought and the potential concept, you know, having this like varying array of people who all have to quarantine together could have potentially been really, really funny or really dramatic or interesting. And while there is definitely a lot of drama within the book, you never fully get a sense of like the stakes behind it because you never really get that invested in the characters. Unfortunately, there were just too many characters featured to have any particular length of time invested in developing a full character arc for them. Not to mention, there are just so many different characters and names that without having visuals to put behind it, it is a little bit hard to follow. Like, whereas if it were a TV show or something, I feel like with that many people, they could get actors who look different, so it would be much more clear about who's who. But without having the visuals to go with it, it's just a lot of names without particularly distinct personalities to accompany them. And what strong personalities are featured do kind of feel a little bit more like character stereotypes and caricatures. You know, nobody feels really properly fully fleshed out, with the exception of like maybe Liliana. But even so, we don't end up, in my personal case at least, I didn't personally find like that deep of an emotional investment in her and her story. Like, I was definitely curious to see where it went, but I wasn't like feeling what I wish I were feeling towards her. So to begin, the premise of the book is very, very questionable in itself, because the heads of this corporation approach Liliana about this estate that they really shouldn't know that she has, because that is more personal information that they definitely dug for. And they kind of bring to her this idea of having, you know, half of the company members quarantine at her place and the other half are going to quarantine at one of the other bosses' places. But they kind of broach the subject without really giving her the best option to say no. So like reluctantly, and so she doesn't risk her job, she says yes, not really wanting to. And that already kind of just sets off a tone where it's like, don't love that. Plus it feels very out of place considering that their company is a law firm and most of them are attorneys. So I'm just like, that feels like a lawsuit waiting to happen, but all right. And throughout their quarantining together, there were definite HR violations happening throughout. Some of them by the HR representative who was quarantining with them. So it definitely kind of, like, on one hand, it made it a little bit more believable, because like if a group of so many people are going to be quarantining together, there's definitely going to be some drama and some issues. But at the same time, it also kind of left a little bit of, like, it took you out of the realm of believability a little bit, because it's like, these are all lawyers and they're supposed to be like kind of important business people, and like HR is there, and yet all of this very juvenile and mischievous shit's happening. And it's just like, where are the adults? The writing of the book was fairly simple, so it's definitely like a quick and easy read. Just about anybody would probably be able to get through it without any issue. So I like that on an accessibility kind of range. But it did leave to some of the plot points feeling a bit underdeveloped, including several points that just really would have benefited from more build-up before getting to like dialogue. Because there were several conversations that took place throughout the book where I was left wondering what I missed and if I like had accidentally skipped a page, simply because like some reactions to certain things were so much more extra and dramatic than they needed to be. And just there were a couple of things that just felt very out of place, and they would have been much improved by just a little bit of addition and build up into the scene. You know, just a few extra sentences or paragraphs explaining and further elaborating, because there were several different points in the book where things went 0 to 100 with no warning, and it was really kind of just like, where did that come from? Like, I would understand maybe some mild reactions, but things were just 0 to 100, and I was feeling a little lost at certain points because I was genuinely wondering what I missed, to the point where there were a few instances where I even like went to check and see if I missed a page. Like, it made sense narratively, but like, or like it made sense grammatically, but narratively, what the fuck is going on? And the book itself did feel very, it felt like it was trying a little too hard to be era appropriate in such a way that it feels like it would very quickly fall out of relevancy. Like, by the time I even read the book, it was Granted, we are at this point in time still very, very much in the depths of the pandemic. But when it comes to the handling of it in the US, I'm not going to go too into detail with it because I think it's been handled piss poor, whatever. At this point, we're kind of over the hump of like any potential lockdowns and official like government mandated quarantines and things like that. So by the time I got to reading this book, it already felt a little out of date. Like, oh, I remember the beginning of the pandemic. It's 2 years ago now. And it's like, I remember that, but also depending on how old you were and the situation you were in, it's not going to be particularly memorable or relatable to a lot of people. Now, definitely there are a lot of people that are going to kind of get it, or at least relate to it hypothetically, but it was very much trying to be very now and of the moment. And even just like a year or two after the events, I was feeling like, oh, okay, it's a little out of date. And it really shouldn't be just yet. I did really, really appreciate the mysterious aspect behind the book. And there was a bit of a narrative drive to where you were left wondering, and it definitely kept you reading because you wanted to find out what was going to happen, you know, like, is the house haunted? Is there a ghost? Is one of the coworkers or friends being sketchy? You know, is somebody trying to sabotage things, or is it paranormal? And you didn't really know until, you know, obviously like the mysteries are revealed at the end and you figure it out. For me, it wasn't the most satisfying ending, but it also wasn't the least satisfying in the mystery reveal. I'd say I was pretty neutral about it. I was like, all right, I can kind of see where that came from. I think it could have been more interesting if it went in a different direction, but it also would have had to have, like, it would have required a little bit more backstory and clues throughout the book if it had gone in a different direction. So I get how they got to where they were. I would have been curious to see other things, but I'm not like, oh, it would have been so much better if it were this instead of this or anything like that. It was kind of just like, all right, I'm chill. I appreciate the attempt. I wouldn't necessarily say that like the mystery was a driving factor in the book. And they definitely could have played it up a bit more to market it and like make it more of a mystery suspense kind of thing versus what it was, which kind of felt more just like a slice of life, kind of like we're going to follow these people as they quarantine together, but it didn't feel like there was a major point behind it. And there were definitely points throughout the book where they really, really tried to give it an emotional depth that just wasn't really there for me. And granted, some people may relate to it more, so some people may definitely get a little bit more of that emotional depth, but it just didn't do it for me. And you know, there were also definitely points throughout the book where they tried to bring in different political representations and civil rights aspects and just diversity and different conversations from multiple different points. And the attempt was really, really appreciated. Like, I get what they were going for. It just also did not do it for me. It could have been done a lot better. And it could have felt a lot more authentic instead of just like, we need to check our diversity boxes. Which a lot of things lately have kind of been feeling like. So it's definitely not exclusive to this book. I feel like that's definitely a very modern literature topic that we're facing, is that there are a lot of books that are trying to add diversity, but it doesn't feel genuine. So it's kind of like you almost don't want the diversity attempt because then maybe it would have ended up a better narrative. But you also don't want to say that you don't want the diversity attempts because you really do want genuine diversity. But the difference is that it needs to feel genuine and not like it's a caricature or just thrown in there to be there or anything like that. Ultimately, even though the author is presumably a woman, it kind of had like women written by men energy. TM. Like, and not even specifically just like the women kind of fell off. It was just all of the characters felt a little off. And it could have definitely been like, you know, maybe it was an older author trying to write younger characters, and that just wasn't just... The characters felt like they were being written by people who didn't relate to the characters, but all of the characters kind of felt like that. So I don't really know what went wrong. Like, you'd think at least some of them would feel more genuine because there would be some kind of relatability from the author to the character, but they all just felt slightly off, you know, like 2 inches to the left kind of vibes. Just like, I don't know, it just off. And I do feel bad, and I do feel like I've totally slammed this book. It was fine. I wouldn't be opposed to reading it again, but I also don't necessarily think that I would crave to read it again, like some of the other books that I've gotten to recently. And I don't really know who I would necessarily recommend this book to, other than like, it kind of feels like a mom book. Like middle-aged soccer moms might be into it. And you know what? Maybe the target demographic of this audience was just a little bit older than I am, you know, kind of more middle-aged. And that's totally fine and definitely an option. So maybe other people are going to find it a lot more fun than I did. I didn't hate it by any means. I saw the concept and I liked it and I wanted it to do better than it did. And it's definitely like, it is such a fun concept, like this group of such a variety of people all quarantining together in this mysterious estate that was willed to like a coworker who may or may not have been fucking him. Like, conceptually, and the premise is so interesting and fun. Like, I definitely would love somebody to kind of take this concept and turn it into a TV show or something, especially with some of the visuals behind it, making it easier to differentiate and relate to different characters. It does have the potential as a story to do well in the right context. Like, if Netflix wanted to pick it up and create like an original series, it could be like a fun drama, comedy, horror ? So it's like, as a story, it's really not bad. It was just the execution as a novel was not my favorite. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I had a blast hanging out with y'all. Peace.